Hi there. As we move into Module 2, I wanted to talk a little bit about the 4 domains that we'll be talking about for quite some time in this course. You will see slides that just list the contents of the 4 domains, and it's not even breaking it down into meaning or duties within those domains. I want to speak a little bit to those right now. One thing that you'll note is that if you've been around the counseling field, even studying the addiction counseling field for more than a year, you might notice that a little over a year ago there were 8 domains. The domains are the same now as they were before when there were 8, but they've condensed them down into 4 and paired them with like domains within each domain. And when I say they condense them, I'm talking about the credentialing body, the testing body, IC and RC. They are an international certification organization that administers and develops testing for addiction counselors. Texas is one of the states that has addiction counseling licensure, not just a certification, so it's a little higher standard, and our testing body is through the international testing body, which gives some I believe more credibility, and it also gives reciprocity in some other states, and gives us a license. And with a license in the state of Texas, and the legislature just upheld this when their session ended, that we are able to continue to diagnose within our scope of practice, which means that all the diagnoses within the DSM-5, we're able to continue to diagnose those. That's the only thing we can diagnose within the DSM, but it's important that we are able to continue to make that diagnosis in order to do the work that we do. Now back to the domains. The 4 domains are essentially the core components of what addiction counselors do. And the first domain is screening, assessment, and engagement. I like that they put that first because the screening, the assessment, and the initial engagement with a client does come first. It's one of the very first things we do. Whenever you work in a treatment center that's licensed by the state of Texas, a client must be screened in order to go into the intake and assessment process. And after the assessment, they must meet diagnostic criteria for your level of care in order to be admitted to that program, to be appropriate and eligible for that service. So it's really important that that comes very first. And engagement, I talk about engagement all the time whenever I'm talking about making the first contact with a client. Whenever we pick up the phone for the very first time to make that appointment with the client, to answer a question, just to screen a caller, we are at that point making our first contact where we have the opportunity to begin building rapport. If you can imagine calling someone for treatment, calling the first time, reaching out for help is a little intimidating. And clients are somewhat anxious and some angry and afraid and very uncertain about what they are getting into if they do follow through with the treatment process. So it's so important that whoever answers the phone, whether they're clinical or not, that first engagement is just so critical, because when we eventually get the person to the treatment center to meet with the clinician and begin the intake process, we want them to feel welcome. We don't want them to have been further beat up in the process, because addiction really does beat people up all on its own. And I'll talk more about that later in the semester, but I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about the second domain. The second domain is treatment planning, collaboration, and referral. Treatment planning is one of my favorite parts of record keeping. I really enjoy the assessment, but with the assessment, you're able to gather a lot of data to put some really good treatment plans into effect with the client. And the treatment plan is should essentially be a roadmap. If someone were to only look at a treatment plan and a client record, they should be able to determine from beginning to end the journey that the client took. I'll talk a lot about treatment planning whenever we get to that stage, but treatment planning essentially is taking the problem, looking at some short-term and long-term goal setting there with the client's input, because there's no use in developing a treatment plan that the client isn't in agreement with, and putting to task the client to do things I like to call homework. There's probably a better way to say that, but to put the homework into action so the client can take action on the problem area so they can work toward their goals. It's a little more in depth than that, and we'll talk about it when we get there. Counseling is the third domain, and I think many people believe that whenever you get into addiction counseling, counseling is all we do. However, it's only a component of what we do. Relationship building is woven throughout everything we do, but counseling is a very specific item or items within the job that we do, because we counsel. We do education, we also do individual counseling, we also do some family collaborations and counseling, but that is one domain all in of itself. And then there's the fourth one, and that's professional and ethical responsibilities. That's a huge one for me. Whenever I'm teaching, whenever I'm supervising, I spend a lot of time focused on ethical and professional responsibilities, because the truth is, or at least the truth as I see it, is if we aren't ethical and if we aren't professional and attend to our professional duties as per our license, per facility license in treatment centers, then we have no ability to affect change for a client or to serve them. And it's being an LCDC, being in the addiction community, being in the recovery community as a professional is a choice. And when we sign up for taking the LCDC test, when we sign up for obtaining the LCDC intern certification or license, we are agreeing to what they ask us to abide. And if we don't want to abide by ethical standards or within our scope of practice, then we don't have to be an LCDC, and that's a real big thing for me. So I believe people can do more damage than they can do good if they practice unethically or in an unprofessional manner, avoiding their professional responsibilities. I am really hoping that you guys are getting into the swing of how this online learning works. I am hopeful and would love some feedback on whether or not videos are helpful to you. And everything that I put in the videos, I will also put in writing somewhere. I also put a link to the videos so you can do closed caption through YouTube if necessary or needed. And I really look forward to talking more in this class. Like I think I said in my introduction, record keeping is one of my favorite parts of the job, and I know that's really odd, and to some people in the counseling field, they think that they think that's horrific because not everyone likes record keeping. But I like knowing the rules, and I like being able to abide by standards. I think that it's just the utmost important that we do the right thing when it comes to working with people who are coming to us for a service and they're vulnerable. I consider people in counseling in a vulnerable population, and I think that it's our duty and responsibility. It's part of our professional and ethical responsibilities to do the right thing. Have a fantastic rest of the module, and I'll be back with you really soon.